Let me ask you something right now. When was the last time you heard a sitting American president lay out exactly what he wants from a hostile nation in plain English with zero ambiguity and then actually back it up with the credible threat of military force? Because that is exactly what is happening right now with Iran, and if you are not paying close attention, you are about to miss one of the most significant diplomatic moments of this decade. Stay with me, because this goes much deeper than what you are seeing in the headlines. We are talking about negotiations that are unfolding right now, with Vice President J.D. Vance arriving in Pakistan and laying out the framework for what these talks are supposed to look like. And the language coming out of the White House is not diplomatic fluff. It is sharp, it is direct, and according to analysts who have watched this region for decades, it is unlike anything America has put on the table in nearly half a century. That is not an exaggeration. That is a 47-year gap we are talking about. So the question you need to be asking is this: what does Trump actually want from Iran, and why does it matter so much right now? Because the answer to that question changes everything about how you understand what is happening in the Middle East today. Here is where it gets interesting. Former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Mark Wallace, who also leads the organization United Against Nuclear Iran, was asked directly about what framework is guiding these negotiations, and what he described is what insiders are calling the Trump Doctrine. Now, that phrase gets thrown around a lot, but Wallace broke it down in a way that actually cuts through the noise. The core idea is simple on the surface, but enormous in practice. The United States is extending an open hand for diplomacy, just like previous administrations have done. That part is nothing new. What is new is the other hand. Because for the first time in decades, according to Wallace, there is a genuine military option sitting right behind that diplomatic offer. Not a suggestion, not a vague warning buried in a State Department memo, an actual, credible, ready-to-deploy military posture that Iran reportedly understands is real. Wallace compared this to Ronald Reagan's approach with Mikhail Gorbachev during the final years of the Soviet Union. Think about what that means for a second. Reagan did not just talk. He made clear that America had the willingness and the capability to back up every word at the negotiating table. And that combination, diplomacy with real teeth behind it, is what Wallace believes ultimately forced the Soviets to the table in a serious way. The argument being made now is that Trump is operating from the same playbook, and whether you agree with Trump's broader politics or not, that parallel is worth taking seriously. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Do you think this kind of pressure diplomacy actually works, or does it just push hostile nations further away? I genuinely want to know what you think. Now let us go directly to the source, because Trump himself was asked a very simple question by a reporter: what would a good deal look like? And his answer was about as straightforward as it gets. He said, no nuclear weapon, number one. That is 99% of it. He even acknowledged that in some ways the situation already resembles regime change, though he was careful to clarify that was never officially listed as a requirement. But here is what stands out. When the reporter pushed on the Strait of Hormuz, Trump said it would open up automatically. His reasoning was almost casual about it. Iran needs the strait to be open because that is how they make money. So in Trump's framing, a real deal essentially solves the Hormuz problem on its own, because Iran's economic survival depends on it. Now that might sound overly simple, Critics would absolutely push back on that logic, but what is notable is how clearly and consistently Trump has actually laid out these demands across multiple settings, from brief press moments all the way to long-form interviews. According to analysts following this closely, the full list includes no nuclear weapons, no advanced ballistic missiles capable of reaching the United States, restrictions on Iran's drone program, limitations on the terrorist proxy networks Iran funds across the region, and an end to what has effectively been a decades-long stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz that has dragged on the global economy for nearly 50 years. That is a comprehensive list, and the fact that it has been articulated consistently is, reportedly, something that even some of Trump's harshest critics have had difficulty genuinely refuting. Here is the part of this story that I think is getting almost no attention, and it absolutely should be. When you look at who actually showed up from Iran to these negotiations, something immediately raises questions. According to observers watching this closely, the Iranian delegation does not appear to represent a unified, confident government coming to the table from a position of strength. Quite the opposite. The signals coming out of Iran's leadership structure suggest something that looks reportedly uncertain, possibly even fractured internally. Now think about what that means. If Iran's leadership is not fully aligned on how to respond to this moment, that changes the entire dynamic of what is happening at the negotiating table. A divided government negotiating under military pressure is in a fundamentally different position than a unified one. And the question that nobody seems to be asking loudly enough is this: who exactly is making decisions for Iran right now? And do they have the internal authority to actually close a deal even if they wanted to? This is the kind of detail that does not make the front page, but could end up being the single most important factor in whether these talks succeed or collapse entirely. Because you can have the most perfectly crafted diplomatic offer in the world, but if the other side cannot agree internally on whether to accept it, the whole thing falls apart, regardless. Let me know in the comments if you think Iran is serious about a deal this time, or if this is the same delay and deflect strategy we have seen before. This brings us to a question that is genuinely uncomfortable, and one that former Ambassador Wallace did not shy away from. Where are America's allies? Specifically, the countries that have enormous economic stakes in the Strait of Hormuz, European nations, Asian trading partners, NATO members, the countries whose economies are directly impacted every single time there is tension in that waterway. Why are they largely on the sidelines? Wallace was candid about his frustration here. He describes himself as a devoted supporter of the Atlantic Alliance and a consistent defender of NATO, but he pointed out something that carries real weight. When Iran was supplying Shahed drones to Russia for use against Ukraine, the European response was slow and reportedly reluctant. NATO allies did not designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization until January of this year. That kind of hesitation, according to Wallace, reflects a broader pattern of European allies being unwilling to commit fully to confronting Iran, even when their own interests are directly at stake. His conclusion was blunt. There is only one nation right now with the military capability to actually enforce a deal of this magnitude, and that is the United States. European allies should be stepping up, he argued, offering more, spending more on defense, and standing alongside America in any coalition that emerges from these talks. Whether that coalition materializes or whether the U.S. ends up navigating this largely alone is a question that will define how this entire situation plays out over the the coming weeks. So let us bring this all the way back to the title, because this is the part that actually matters. What Trump wants from Iran is not complicated when you lay it out clearly. No nuclear weapons, no long-range missiles, restrictions on drones and proxy warfare, and an open Strait of Hormuz. That is the package. And what makes this moment genuinely different from the last 47 years of failed diplomacy is the combination of clarity and consequence sitting behind those demands. Previous administrations from both parties have tried versions of this: sanctions, negotiations, incentives, temporary agreements that eventually collapsed. What reportedly has not existed until now is an American president willing to pair that diplomatic offer with a military posture that regional and global players appear to be taking seriously. Whether that ultimately produces a breakthrough or escalates into something far more dangerous is the question that should be keeping every serious foreign policy observer up at night right now. And here is the thing that I think gets lost in all the partisan noise around Trump. You can have opinions about his style, his rhetoric, his domestic policies, but what is unfolding with Iran right now deserves to be evaluated on its own terms. Because if this works, the implications for global energy markets, for Middle East stability, for American credibility on the world stage are enormous. And if it does not work, the consequences could be just as significant in the other direction. This is the moment, and whether the world is ready to reckon with it seriously or not, it is happening right now. So I want to hear from you. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think Trump can actually close a deal with Iran, or is this headed somewhere much darker? If you are new here, make sure you subscribe, because we break down the stories that actually matter, without the spin. And in the next video, we are going deeper into something that has been building quietly behind the scenes in Washington that almost no one is covering yet. You are going to want to see that one.